Hello, welcome to our summer bi-weekly book talks for every young adult. We're so glad to join you again for our second book talk of the month for Pride Month, and we got a lot of great titles to talk about for you today. I think just looking at an overview of them, some of them I've read as well, some of the other members, but some of them I haven't heard of. So we're going to be introduced to a lot of a wide variety of interesting texts, I think, today. And that's what's cool about, I think, this month and reading new young adult lit it's more inclusive by LGBT authors and topics and things like that. So that kind of segues into this first book that I read for this week called Pet. And this is a wonderfully bizarre book, unlike anything I've read ever. They are a very interesting author. They have only written a couple of books, but already broken some national fame for their writing. This is an interesting book. It's sort of like this weird magical realism sort of modern fable, parable, sorry, if you will. It takes place in kind of the near future, and this character right here, this transgendered character, lives in the future world where everything's kind of utopian because all the monsters have been taken care of, and there's like no more evil in the world because all the monsters have been arrested and locked up and all this stuff. But the trippy part of this book is the protagonist's mother is a painter, and she paints this creepy looking like bird-like demon-y angel kind of devil creature in a painting, and I'm not spoiling the book for you, I'm just giving you kind of the premise here. So that creature comes to life and forms a special bond with the protagonist, and then they go on this search because there are still monsters in the world, and they go on this search together to track down a monster who's doing a very evil thing to someone in her neighborhood. And I don't really want to tell you more than that because it's just a very unique written book, unlike anything I've read. It kind of is almost its own genre and its own style. It's kind of like this weird twisted fairy tale that works for just an analogy of the hidden evils that are like in our world. It's pretty cool, and it's not that long. It's like 200 pages, so you could read it in one evening. I think our next book talk, actually she's not here, and she was going to talk about Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, which is a great book, and was also made into a movie. I highly recommend that book. It's great realistic teen fiction. It's all about Simon, a high school boy who starts writing back and forth letters to a secret crush that he has, and it's his coming out story. And it's just wonderful and heart-touching, and all the supporting characters are just as developed and flawed as Simon is. And I wanted to talk about this book because Hulu has put out a series called Love, Victor, which is about a new character, Victor Salazar, whose family moves. His dad gets a different job, and they have to move to the new. So he's a new student at the school that Simon went to, and it's his story of Victor's sexuality. And I think it's just a great series. I watched it all in one day. It was just so good. So those are some other shows, movies, and titles you can think about. I'm going to get this thing rolling further, though, and pass it to Katie for her book.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming back. I chose this for this book episode of Book Talks to read a book called Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nung. It is a beautiful novel set in an Asian country, fantasy novel, so it's not really a real place, but the author in her note in the back mentions that it's heavily influenced by her growing up in Malaysia. And in this world of Ikara, there are three castes, three sort of societies, groups of societies. The paper caste is the lowest one, steel's in the middle, and moon caste is the top. And so the moon caste are the rulers of the society, and they have a tradition of having the demon king select girls to be his concubines in his castle. And that is an honor. Being a paper girl is a huge honor for families, but our main character, Lee, she's forced into that role. She is kidnapped from her home and forced into this role simply because of the color of her eyes. And so the beautiful thing about this novel is that as she's adjusting to this new life, Lee falls in love with another paper girl, which is forbidden in this society. So the novel is really about her coming to terms with that feeling and how they move on from there and what they do about this king who is really sort of an abusive king. And the thing I also really liked about the novel is that it has the really important rough conversations about things like abuse and sexual assault, which are hard to have in young adult novels, but are also really important to have. So I wanted to read you real quick from the author's note, how our wonderful author explains it best. And she said, the concept of Girls of Paper and Fire also comes from a personal, deep yearning for more diverse novels, particularly in YA. I believe it's important for everyone, but especially young people, to see themselves in the stories they consume, to feel acceptance and kinship, to be inspired for their own stories, real and imagined. Even magical worlds have roots in our own, and I would love to see more books reflecting the rich variety of our individual realities. The story of the Paper Girls is one that is sadly representative of many women's experiences, my own included. While I realize these are hard discussions, especially for teens, it is of vital importance we have them. Books can be safe places to explore difficult topics. While we cannot shelter young people from being exposed to sexual violence, whether through lived experience or indirectly, we can give them a way to safely engage with and reflect upon these issues. I hope Girls of Paper and Fire provides such a space. So that spoke to me, especially in this month, and especially we've been talking this whole time about representation matters, even in a fantastical, beautiful novel like Girls of Paper and Fire, which is the first in a trilogy, I believe it's going to be. The second book is already out, and the third one is forthcoming. So I just thought that was really important, that this is sort of rare to see an author discuss really hard but poignant topics like this. And so I'm almost done, you guys. I've got 100 pages left, and there's political intrigue. Stuff's happening. I can't wait to come back and tell you or give you a review about what's going to happen next. So I'm going to pass it back over to my friend Steve for his next book talk.
Okay, next book I'm going to talk about is called The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. And oh my gosh, this book, I'm obsessed with it. I know this is a book I'll probably reread maybe a second or a third time. It's just so well done. I read it on one evening because I just started reading and I couldn't stop. It's written in verse, so it looks intimidating because it's sort of thick when you first look at it, but it is written in verse, so it does read quicker than, you know, average prose or whatnot. This is the story of Michael, and it really starts from when he's like, you know, 4 or 5 years old and starting to play with Barbies all the way through his growing up, coming of age to the end of the book when he's in college and he does drag for the first time. And you can already see it's not really giving anything away just by looking at the cover. And if you read the blurb about the book, you know that he's going to discover himself and his identity, and you know as you're reading the book that it's coming, that he's going to discover and create his drag character, which is him coming to terms with his identity. And it really touches deep on those intersecting points of his identity, as being growing up and discovering his sexuality, dealing with having an absent father, dealing with biracialism. It's just, and his voice is just so, you just connect and fall in love with this Michael kid, because he's just, I don't know, you can't stop putting it down. And Dean Otta is a famous writer and poet performer, so he is really a master at poetic words and really using, few words to make a meaningful impact. This is a great book that just speaks to pride. And I'm not going to read something from this book, but I want to talk about something that's in the back of the book, kind of like Katie talked about her last book. Very end of this book, and this won't ruin anything for you, he has this last little poem, How to Come Out as Gay. And I think that was very powerful, and it's perfectly said. And I think that is one of the most important things about this book, specifically for whoever you are. I really think just everyone embracing your true identity, and that's such a powerful universal theme. So next, I'm going to pass it to Amanda for her book.
Hey guys, thanks Steve. So the book that I'm covering tonight is All Out, the No Longer Secret Stories of Queer Teens Throughout the Ages, and it's edited by Sandra Mitchell, but it has a ton of authors who have written short stories, and it goes along with our theme of different perspectives, because we have people from all different walks of life, stories from everything from mystical to retellings. For example, there's a retelling of Robin Hood. In addition, there's brand new, really cool stories. One of them is about a roller disco that is awesome, and it really hit my heart. But the three that I think are the coolest, Molly's Lips, and They Don't Kiss at the End, and New Year, three stories that I think highlight both different perspectives of individuals who come from different places and different lives, and how interactions and relationships can change who you are inside for the better, and help you question who you are so that you can do better with your life and your world. So All Out, it's just a really cool book. There's some mystical stuff, there's some realism stuff. Each story is a little bit different. And the last story takes place in New Mexico, which is really cool. And I believe the author of that story, Katie covered one of her books last book talk. We Set the Night on Fire. So that author is also available in this book. And the sequel to it just came out as well. The name escapes me right now, but All Out, it's a really quick read, really great short stories, and I highly recommend it. I'm going to hand it over to Misty, who's going to review another amazing book.
Thanks, Amanda. I am going to talk about tonight The 57 Bus by Dashka Slater. And this is a book that reads like fiction, but it's nonfiction. And it is an amazing story. There's so many different levels to this book, so many different layers. It started out as with the author, Dashka Slater, writing this for a magazine. And it was the story of these two teenagers who their paths never really crossed, except on the ride home on the 57 bus in California as they were leaving school. And the two teenagers, Sasha and Richard, they met in a way that it's horrible. And it's one of those teenagers, boys doing, silly things sometimes. But Sasha, a little bit about the characters. They are a white teen and they identify as agender. So Sasha will sometimes be wearing skirts, but with button-down shirts and ties. Sometimes Sasha will be wearing dress pants with a frilly top. Sasha's just trying to decide what Sasha wants and who Sasha wants to be. And Sasha is also slightly autistic in the story. So sometimes some of the ways that Sasha is interviewed, you get to know her and you get to know her life and her parents very well. Richard is an African-American youth, and he is from a lower socioeconomic area. And their paths, like I said, they cross on the bus. And Richard, some of his friends say, hey, light that skirt on fire, light that girl's skirt on fire. And the girl that they're referencing happens to be Sasha. So Richard decides to go ahead and light their skirt on fire as a joke, as a prank. unfortunately, it goes up in flames. Sasha receives third-degree burns, and Richard the next day is arrested at school. And so the book, and that's all, I'm not giving anything away, because the story is really about what happens afterwards. And it's a story about the justice system. It's a story about marginalized groups. It's a story about identity, class, race, justice. It's all of it together. And it is an amazing story because the author interviews Richard's family, interviews Sasha, interviews Sasha's family, and really gets to know. And so the book is written almost like fiction because the character development is amazing. But these are real people, and this really happened. And it's one of these books that it just stays with you. And so, like I said, it's the 57 bus. It happened, I believe, in 2016. So I won't tell you where they are now or what has happened, but I firmly recommend it. It's out in paperback now. So you can find it for a little bit of a cheaper price. And I'm sure that all libraries have it. But next, let's go on, and I'm going to pass this off to Deborah for our next talk.
Thanks, Misty. That's if Deborah can figure out how to work her microphone. So, hi, welcome back. This time I'm going to talk about Fangirl. So this is a book by the lovely named author Rainbow Rowell. I like the name of the author almost as much as I like the book, and I liked it a lot. So Fangirl, our heroine in Fangirl is Kath. She's a young woman who is going off for her first year of college. She has a twin. Her twin's name is Wren. So her mom and dad had kind of an interesting sense of humor. They named their set of twins Kath Wren. So one name, two girls. Kath is an ardent fan of a series that sounds a whole lot like a Harry Potter series. And the series is about a protagonist named Simon Snow. So Kath spends a lot of her time writing fan fiction for this series. And she creates alternative endings for some of the books. She has a huge following among the fan fiction crowd. And she is writing, in her version, the main character of the novel, Simon, is developing a romance between his enemy, Baz. So it's a romance between two boys. In the real world, though, Kath is off to her first year of college with her twin sister. And for the first time, the twin sister wants to separate herself from Kath and develop her own set of friends. So Kath is sort of abandoned by her sister. She is I would say she's kind of on the spectrum, Kath. She's very much an introvert, not really adept at dealing with people. And so, of course, she gets assigned a roommate who's not only older, but an extrovert to boot. And the roommate comes with this eternally cheery boyfriend, and they're both invading Kath's privacy like all the time. So in this real world, during this first year of college, the real stuff is that Kath has to deal with a fiction writing professor who just despises fan fiction. She has to deal with her roommate and the eternally cheery boyfriend. She deals with a couple of potential romantic interests for herself. And she's dealing with her sister, who wants to separate herself from Kath, and that's hard for her. And the book also brings up a little bit of a mental health issue because Kath's father has a mental health problem, and he's left at home alone for the first time. The mom has disappeared years ago. She does come back in the book, but it's not a nice scene. So as all of this is going on in Kath's real life, in her fan fiction life, she is putting her character, Simon Snow, into all these different situations as well. So we have parallel paths working here. Kath is developing her own identity in the real world, and she's working on developing Simon's and Baz's identity in the fan fiction world. So I really liked it. I liked the book. Kath is an enormously appealing character. She has trouble relating to the real world, but she comes across as totally believable. You like her a lot by the end of the book. So I will say, check it out, Rainbow Rowell, Fangirl. And I'm going to pass it on to Adrienne, and I think she has another Rainbow Rowell. We're on a Rainbow Rowell kick. So here we go.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm going to pull up the book since I don't have my copy of it. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to talk about Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. It's probably not mandatory to read Rainbow Rowell's Fangirl before reading Carry On, but it certainly helps. Fangirl featured excerpts of both the canon Simon Snow and Kath's fanfic spin on the global thing that it becomes. Carry On is basically the full-length Simon Snow novel. So she took Simon Snow's character, Rainbow Rowell did, and it would be like if Kath's whole entire fan fiction was published into a book. Simon Snow is similar to another series with the famous boy wizard, but it's wholly original. Carry On takes place during Simon's 8th year at Watford, which is a school for magical children. Simon plays a unique role in the world of Magies. He's seen as the chosen one who will deliver them from evil, namely the evil called the insidious Humdrum. It takes on the form of Simon as an 11-year-old boy. Simon has a best friend, Penelope, and a girlfriend named Agatha. Simon also has an arch nemesis roommate, Baz. When Baz doesn't return at the beginning of the school term, Simon's suspicious. Is Baz planning something? Tensions are running high at Watford. There's a divide between the old families and the people who want social and political reforms. When Baz finally returns to Watford, things are different. Instead of hating Baz like he's always done, Simon's concerned about his welfare. And instead of wanting to kill Simon, Baz wants to kiss Simon. As the world of Magies begins to crumble, Simon and Baz realize they are stronger as allies than as enemies. I loved this book. I love the whole series. I loved everything about it. I love Simon. I love Baz. Penelope was probably, though, my favorite character. She's smart and confident. She has fierce loyalty to Simon, and it's just really poignant. I love the allusions to previous Simon Snow escapades. It took place before Carry On, which normally would be confusing in a book. Coming into the middle of the story was fascinating in this novel. I love the way that Rowell developed her own language of magical spells. She takes snippets of songs and popular phrases. There's multiple narrators, so everyone has their own perspective. I don't think the whole story would have resonated as well if we only had Simon's point of view. So I would absolutely recommend Carry On. I love the Simon Snow excerpts in Fangirl, and I was so excited when Rainbow Rowell announced she was going to write a Simon Snow novel. There's also a sequel to this book called Wayward Son. So now I'm going to go back to Steve.
Okay, so the third book I read for this book club is The Gravity of Us. It's by Phil Stamper, and he's a new emerging author. This book just came out. It's still in hardcover. I want to read you a little blurb here, which I thought was funny. He wrote some Zelda fan fiction when he was like 12 years old, and 14 years old. And he wrote a little disclaimer with it. He said, please, if you write a review, don't criticize my work. So that kind of sense of humor and I think cleverness is one of his strengths as a writer. And this is the story of Cal Lewis, who is he's kind of like a teen star. He developed this app called Flash Fame, and he's like an investigative journalist, and he's done some stories that got some national attention in New York where he lives. But his father is an airline pilot and gets accepted by NASA because NASA is launching a new program to send people to Mars. So their family has to move to Texas, and it's for the summer right before his senior year. So Cal is super bummed about having to move, right? And he gets totally immersed into this kind of celebrity lifestyle of the NASA families. And what this book does is kind of cool. It kind of gives you you get a little sense of the history, because in the 60s during the space race, all the astronaut families lived in a neighborhood together, and like NASA bought them all houses, and they kind of became celebrities in a way, the news following them around and stuff. So that happens in this book too. There's a reality show called Star Watch that is following them along, and it's kind of an interesting journalism story it's really a romantic, realistic fiction story, because Cal meets this other kid from one of the families, Leon, and then it's really their story and them falling in love. But sort of wrapped inside of that is also this interesting journalistic story about reality TV and like exploiting that whole thing with the NASA families and stuff. It's just a good, pretty solid written. I read this book pretty quickly too. It just reads real fast. Becky Albertalli, that's who, she wrote a little blurb about praising this book. And that's actually the same author who wrote the Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda book. So this is very much kind of, I think, in that vein of realistic fiction writing, with just funny and touching characters. But what's cool about this book is it's not like, that's the story, everything I explained to you. It's not like his whole coming out story or anything like that. He's already out and he's already comfortable with his sexuality, and his parents have already accepted him. It's just like any other sort of teen fiction book you would read, but the protagonist is a gay character. And I think that's important with all the context of the books we're talking about here, because in the back of this book, in the author notes, he talks about he was basically a book nerd when he was a kid and got into journalism, and then now he's becoming an author. But he would read all these books in the library, but he would never see himself in any of the stories. So it's kind of cool now he's becoming a known writer that he is putting people like himself in stories, and that is more timely and important than ever, I think. So that's it for me. I'm going to move it on to pass it off to Misty.
Hi. Sorry, I'm having dog issues. They're whining at the door and then barking in the room. But see, my little Trooper wanted to say hello. Say hi, Trooper. Look, there's an audience. So anyway, that's Trooper. If you hear him bark, I apologize. So my last book that I'm going to talk about tonight is Symptoms of Being Human by Jeff Garvin. And this book came out in 2016. I read it in 2016, and it's one that I keep going back to. I really love it. And I will be honest, I had never heard the term gender fluid before I read this book. The main character, Riley Kavanaugh, makes the statement at the very beginning of the book. The first thing you're going to want to know about me is, am I a boy or am I a girl? Throughout the entire book, you never know. Riley is Riley, and that is all that we need to know about Riley. And it wasn't even until the end of the book, when I started thinking about it, that the author did a fantastic job not using any pronouns to identify Riley as a male or as female. I don't even recall Jeff Garvin using the pronoun they, because, as an English teacher, that would throw me off. And I just remember at the end of the book thinking, I don't think there's a pronoun in here. But Riley Kavanaugh is a high school student and is gender fluid, like I said, and Riley has not come out to their parents yet. And this might not seem like that big of a deal, but Riley's dad is a U.S. congressman who is running for re-election. And his stance isn't necessarily pro-Riley, let's say. And so Riley has some major anxiety, and Riley starts seeing a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist suggests, well, Riley, why don't you start writing an online blog? So Riley does, and creates the online persona of Alex and tells their story through this online blog, keeping it so that people don't realize that Riley and Alex are the same person. And through it, Riley leaves a Catholic school and goes to a new public high school, meets some fantastic new friends. One, there's a friend Solo and there's a friend Chewbacca, and as a Star Wars geek, I love it. But then as in all books, something happens, and Riley's blog is hacked by somebody at the school, and so Riley is basically outed as Alex, and everybody realizes that the new kid, Riley, is actually this person who's been writing this blog that has actually become quite famous and quite popular, you know, around the school. It's a great book. I love it. I love the character of Riley. It is just, I think Jeff Garvin did an amazing job just with Riley's character. I mean, it sounds like I'm being redundant, but really, I don't know what else to say. It's so good. A friend of mine and I gave a bunch of teachers at El Dorado High School one year. We gave them a class set of books, and Sometimes Being Human was one of the books that we chose for them, because I think it is an important book to have in a classroom. I think it is an important book to have in a school. I think it is an important book just for anybody who is trying to figure out who they are. And finding that mirror that you can look into and see somebody else living that life, or that window that you can see into somebody else's perspective. Steve talked about that and talked about authors writing books because they wanted to see themselves as characters in the stories. There is a hashtag Our Own Voices, and it is actually, I wrote it down to make sure, I said, it is books that promote stories that are written by and about the same marginalized groups as the author. So it's a hashtag movement. I don't even know if that's why I'm saying it right, but hashtag Our Own Voices. And they have a website, and they promote authors who are writing about their own experiences, so that readers can now have even more windows, more mirrors that they can look at and can go through to find a book that they can identify with the characters. And remember, it might take you 1 read, 2 reads, 3 reads, 4 reads, but there's a book out there for you. And there's a book out there for everybody where you can find somebody that you can identify with. Trust me, I have a lot of books. And if you see the backgrounds of some of the others in here, you'll see that we have a lot of books. We really do. And so with that concludes our talk tonight. However, I do want to invite you to come back on July 2nd. We will have a special recording for you on July 2nd, as we will be filming our own little book club before talking about the book Darius the Great Is Not Okay. That's our book that we chose for this month. We will be discussing it, and we will be recording it to put on the website for you. So don't forget, you can go see our website, foreveryoungadult.com. And if you have any questions, there's a contact page and you can let us know. But now everybody can jump on and say bye. Bye. Bye.
Everyone,
Happy Pride. Prideful.
happy Pride Month.